Hi, it's Verity here from the design team and welcome back to the WowEmbossingPowder YouTube channel. Today's video is the first Technique Tuesday of the year and these will come to you once a month. Today I'm showing you how to do two ways of combining both dry and heat embossing in your paper crafts and card making projects. So let's get started. Now with my embossing powders, I like to swatch them. I got this idea from Erica, who's also on the design team, and she loves to swatch. So I have them all on a ring here, and I've got the three swatches for this trio. So this is the Indulgence Trio by Tracy Scott. It's got three beautiful colours. The first colour is Golden Vintage Lace, which is a lovely sort of warm sandy goldy colour. Then you've got Cerulean, which is a beautiful turquoise teal with lovely glitter in there. I absolutely love this colour. And the last colour in the trio is Peacoat, which is a beautiful dark navy, and all of these are embossing glitters. The last two are opaque embossing glitters and the first one is translucent, so do bear that in mind when you're layering them on cardstock. Now I'm going to be combining this with dry embossing, so I'm using some embossing folders to do this. Both of these are from Altenew. One is the linked ovals and the other is Geo Diamonds. And these are going to create some really interesting textural backgrounds for some sentiments to sit on. So with embossing folders, there are two sides to them. One side you have a raised edge of the folder, and the other side you have kind of like the deboss side of the folder. And this will depend on how it sort of embosses or debosses the card stock. Obviously, when you run your card through your die cutting machine, you'll get both impressions and you can decide which side you want to use. But with regards to one of these techniques, we need to be aware of which side to add the ink to. Now you can add ink to both sides, however it all depends whether you want the ink to be in the debossed areas of the cardstock or on the raised embossed areas of the cardstock. And for today's card, we are going to be making sure the ink goes in that debossed area of the cardstock. So I have got the linked ovals folder here and I've opened it up and I'm applying WowEmbossingPowder Clear Ultra Slow Drying Embossing Ink to the side of the folder where it's going to create that deboss impression on the cardstock. With this folder and this debossed area, this is the flattest area of this folder. And this allows me to apply sort of even ink over the folder. I'm not pressing down heavily and I'm just lightly dragging it over the embossing folder. I'm not really tapping down either because I don't want to smush any of the ink down into the folder where there isn't those raised edges, and it's going to sort of make your ink go everywhere. I'm then placing a piece of white cardstock down over the top of that and closing the embossing folder. And then I am running this through my die cutting machine. Now depending on your machine, you will have to set up the sandwich correctly to ensure it embosses it but doesn't tear your cardstock. Now for this first card, I'm going to be using the Cerulean embossing glitter from the Indulgence Trio that we saw earlier on. And I'm just covering this completely. Now, when the cardstock was run through the die cutting machine with the embossing folder, all the embossing ink that sat on your embossing folder has been transferred to your cardstock. And it has been transferred to where the pattern or design was based on which side you use. So it went in the grooves of these linked ovals. Once I've covered it with the embossing glitter, I'm then using my heat gun to heat set it. I've zoomed out here because I want to show you that I use my dual speed heat gun to heat set it on number 2, but I do it from behind. This is because it contains embossing glitter and I want to make sure that the embossing powder melts and traps that glitter in it before it has a chance to blow off. If you heat set from the front, it can blow your embossing glitter off before it's had a chance to melt into the embossing powder. Now, once I'd done this, I did find there were a few areas that were a little bit patchy and I didn't have a full amount of embossing glitter on, or there wasn't much ink in that area when I had inked up my folder, and therefore there wasn't much ink for the embossing glitter to adhere to. So one way to get around that with this kind of design is to use an embossing pen. And WowEmbossingPowder have a fantastic embossing pen to do this with. It's got a bullet nib, so you can get into those fine details, fine nooks and crannies. And all you do is just colour it in as though you're using a pen. Obviously it's clear ink so you won't be able to see where you've coloured, but if you know where you want to colour, which is very easy with this, it's so easy just to touch up your heat embossing. Once I'd applied the ink with the pen to all the areas that I wanted to, I then just covered it with the embossing glitter again, and then I heat set. And this has created a beautiful background with some really interesting texture and design, with that glitter really standing out. So for the second method of applying heat embossing with dry embossing, we are going to just dry emboss the folder normally. This is the Geo Diamonds embossing folder from Altenew, and I'm using a piece of Paradise cardstock from Hero Arts. I've just run this through my die cutting machine normally, no ink in the folder at all. To instead apply the ink, we are going to apply the ink directly to the cardstock. And I'm just prepping the cardstock because I will have handled it quite a bit. That will mean that I might have some fingerprints all over the place. Another way for me to handle the cardstock without having to get my fingerprints over it is to create a makeshift handle. And to do this, I just use a scrap piece of card, add some temporary adhesive, and then adhere this to the back of the cardstock, and then I can move that panel around. Now, as I said, I am covering it with some anti-static powder just because I know I will have handled it and got fingerprints everywhere. To apply the ink, what I'm doing is I'm just using the pad to directly sort of swipe over the top of the cardstock, and I'm doing this over the raised edges of the cardstock. I'm not pressing hard. It's exactly like applying the ink to the embossing folder. We want to just gently swipe the ink pad over the top, just to apply ink to the raised edges of the cardstock. Now once I've done that, I'm then covering it with the Peacoat embossing glitter. This is that beautiful navy embossing glitter with really fine glitter in there, and it's such a beautiful, beautiful colour. Really pops on this Paradise Hero Arts cardstock as well, and really brings out that Geo Diamonds design. Once I've covered it with embossing powder, again I'm heat setting it from beneath, just so that I don't blow off all the embossing glitter before it has a chance to melt. Now I decided I wanted to trim this down to a square panel because my edges were a little bit messy, and it just gave a bit more of a interesting design to the card, having this as a pop of colour on a white card base. I'm just using my guillotine to trim that down just by eye. I'm just eyeballing the size of the square. Now I adhered both of these panels onto a white card base, and then I've added a foiled sentiment from Pinkfresh Studios. These are the brushed sentiments foil plate. And then I've also heat embossed in gold some sentiments from the WowEmbossingPowder Love Sentiments stamp set, Happy Sentiments stamp set, and Happy Birthday Sentiments stamp set. Trimmed these all down and foam mounted them onto the card base. Lastly, I finished off by embellishing the cards with some sequins. I used gold matte sequins on the Love cardstock, and then I used some iridescent sequins from Lucy's cards on the Happy Birthday cardstock. I really love how these turned out. Now these embossing folders have a really bold geometric kind of design to them. And I feel adding this glitter, adding this colour scheme and the gold really softens that design up. And I feel like you could either give this to a male or a female. So let me know in the comments below which one of these is your favourite. Which technique do you prefer? Do you prefer adding the ink first or adding the ink afterwards? All of the products used in today's video are linked in the description box below. You can find out more details and see more photos over on the blog. There's a link in the description box below. If you'd like 10% off at the checkout for Wow Embossing Powder shop, either the UK or US, just use the code that you can see on screen. If you're new to the channel, why not think about subscribing? You can hit that bell icon to be notified when my next video is up. Until next time, happy crafting!